the most underrated spiritual weapon you can use against your enemies. In our spiritual battles, we often seek strength, courage, and the power to overcome. We look to God to arm us with the necessary tools to face life's challenges and to stand against those who may come against us. But sometimes the most powerful weapon we have is also the one we overlook the most: forgiveness. Forgiveness is often seen as a weakness, yet it is one of the most potent spiritual weapons we have in our arsenal. When we choose forgiveness over revenge, we shift our battle from the physical to the spiritual, allowing God to step in and take control. It's through forgiveness that we experience freedom, break spiritual chains, and rise above the enemy's attempts to bring us down. Forgiveness doesn't mean ignoring justice. It means trusting God to handle what we cannot, giving Him room to act in ways that we could never imagine. The enemy wants us to believe that harboring bitterness or holding grudges gives us power, but in reality, it only weighs us down. Forgiveness is a weapon because it frees our hearts from the poison of resentment, allowing us to walk forward unburdened and victorious. Jesus taught us to love and forgive even our enemies, a concept that feels almost impossible at times. But by doing so, we demonstrate a level of spiritual maturity that confounds the enemy and disrupts his plans. When we choose forgiveness, we are standing on God's side, trusting Him to work on our behalf. This act of releasing bitterness and choosing peace allows God's justice to prevail. In this, we embody the teachings of Jesus, who forgave even those who crucified Him, showing us that forgiveness is not a weakness but a path to divine strength and ultimate victory. Forgiveness confuses and dismantles the enemy's plans. One of the most incredible aspects of forgiveness as a spiritual weapon is how it confounds the enemy. The devil relies on division, hatred, and resentment to weaken us and distract us from God's purpose. When we respond to wrongdoing with forgiveness, we disrupt the enemy's tactics. It's a response that he doesn't expect and cannot handle because forgiveness is rooted in divine love and strength, something the enemy cannot corrupt. This act of letting go dismantles the devil's plans to keep us bound by anger or pain, releasing us from his grip. It's an act of spiritual defiance, a reminder to the enemy that we belong to God, not to bitterness or revenge. Forgiveness isn't about ignoring what happened or dismissing the wrong done to us. Instead, it's about refusing to let that wrong dictate our lives. We choose to give our pain to God, trusting Him to handle the situation and the people involved. This choice to forgive protects our spirit from the damage that anger can cause, keeping our focus on God rather than on our enemies. When we forgive, we place the battle back into God's hands, letting Him handle the justice while we rest in His peace. The enemy hates this because it means he loses control over our emotions and thoughts. In choosing forgiveness, we become warriors of peace, guarding our hearts against the tactics of the enemy. Forgiveness brings healing and restores our hearts. Forgiveness is a weapon that not only protects us, but also heals us. When we hold on to grudges, we allow anger and bitterness to fester within us, creating wounds that can take over our lives. These spiritual wounds can limit our ability to feel God's love, blocking us from fully experiencing the joy and peace that He has for us. By forgiving, we open our hearts to healing. We let God into the areas of pain and brokenness, allowing Him to mend what was once hurt. Forgiveness is the beginning of a journey to spiritual wholeness, restoring us to a place where we can feel God's love and strength fully. Forgiving those who hurt us doesn't excuse their behavior, but it does free us from the burden of carrying that pain. It allows us to hand over the responsibility of justice to God, who is the ultimate judge. When we choose to forgive, we are making a decision to walk in God's light, allowing His healing to flow into every broken area of our lives. In doing so, we experience a freedom and a release from the weight of resentment. This newfound peace is a powerful testimony to the strength of God's love in our lives, showing others that it is possible to overcome even the deepest wounds through faith and forgiveness. Forgiveness paves the way for God's miraculous intervention. Sometimes, the very act of forgiving others is what invites God to move powerfully in our lives. By letting go of bitterness, we open ourselves to receive God's blessings without hindrance. Forgiveness is like clearing the path for God's grace to flow. When we choose to forgive, we show that we trust God to handle what we cannot. This act of faith invites God to work in ways that go beyond what we can see. In the Bible, Jesus tells us in Mark 11:25 that when we stand praying, if we hold anything against anyone, we should forgive them so that our prayers are not hindered. Forgiveness, therefore, is not only a command but a key to unlocking God's blessings and presence in our lives. Many times, we hold on to anger, thinking that it protects us, but in reality, It blocks the blessings God wants to give. When we forgive, we remove the barrier that stands between us and God's promises. It's a surrender, an act of trust that God can handle the situation better than we ever could. By letting go of resentment, we give God the opportunity to turn our pain into purpose, our wounds into wisdom, and our trials into testimonies. Forgiveness is a spiritual weapon that opens doors, heals hearts, and brings us closer to the divine love that transforms everything. Forgiveness as a reflection of God's love in us. Choosing to forgive is perhaps the greatest reflection of God's love that we can show to the world. When we forgive, we echo the very heart of God, who forgives us daily without hesitation. God's grace is endless, and every time we forgive others, we are living out that same grace. This act is not only a blessing to ourselves, but also a testimony to others. People notice when we respond with grace instead of bitterness, and it draws them to the peace that only God can provide. Forgiveness is contagious. It spreads love and compassion, inspiring others to seek the same freedom in their own lives. Forgiving others also reminds us of our own need for grace. None of us are perfect, and we all fall short in various ways. When we choose to forgive, we recognize that we too rely on God's mercy. In forgiving others, we find freedom and humility, knowing that we are walking in the footsteps of Christ. This not only strengthens our relationship with God, but also makes us vessels of His love to a world that needs it. Forgiveness is a spiritual weapon that, when wielded, transforms not only us but those around us, shining a light that points directly to God's heart. Choosing forgiveness as your spiritual weapon. Forgiveness is not just a gift we give to others. It's a powerful weapon in our spiritual journey. It liberates us from bitterness, protects our hearts, heals our wounds, and invites God's blessings into our lives. When we choose to forgive, we are choosing to walk in God's love, embodying the same grace that He freely offers to us. It's a choice that may not always be easy, but it's one that leads to true freedom and victory. So, if you're holding on to anger, pain, or resentment, consider the power of forgiveness. Trust that by releasing these burdens to God, you are allowing Him to work on your behalf in ways that go beyond human understanding. Forgiveness doesn't mean condoning what was done to you. It means choosing peace, choosing healing, and choosing God's way over your own. Let forgiveness be your weapon, and watch how God transforms your life, turning every challenge into a stepping stone for greater blessings. Embrace the peace that comes from letting go, knowing that God's love will fill every void, heal every wound, and open doors you never imagined. So guys, let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. For more interesting content, give this video a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more awesome content. Have a nice day, and I will see you in the next video.